In a universe of power, war, and legacies carved in stone, a woman in a hover chair and a man with oil-stained hands dared to believe in something greater, not wealth, not control, but love, a love strong enough to build a bridge beyond stars. The Agora deck of Space Hub Epsilon was called the floating heart of human civilization. At 1,200 kilometers above the orbit of a minor planet, it was more than a food court. It was a stage. Glass domes arched overhead, framing purple-green nebulae outside. Light scattered across flashing holo signs. Women wore hologram dresses that shifted color with their moods. Navy officers strolled in silver cloaks. Alien merchants glowed with pulses that matched their heartbeats. Everything here whispered the same message. To be seen is to exist. Isabelle Veran glided in, her Vespa Roman 9 hover chair humming softly on its cushion of air. Every move she made was deliberate, precise, like a dancer in ceremony. Back straight, eyes forward, lips curved just enough to look composed, not cold. It was the discipline honed over 12 long months since the accident that had taken her legs. The day that split her life in two. Isabelle, the biotech prodigy, youngest CEO ever on the Interplanetary Council, and Isabelle, the woman in the chair. Tonight's blind date, in theory, was supposed to be just for fun. Friends had nudged her. Give it a shot. You need someone outside the lab. The Interlink app had matched her with a partner based on biological frequency compatibility, an algorithm her own company once helped design. Isabelle wanted to believe this time she wouldn't need to hide her trembling behind a polite smile. But when the man arrived, that hope shattered. He was tall, polished shoes, plasma fiber jacket worth a fortune. But his eyes, right away, dropped to the hover chair like a spotlight on an open wound, and he smirked. "This is a joke, right?" His voice was so loud nearby tables turned. "CEO Isabelle Veran, the biotech prodigy, and you're just..." He tossed out his hand like a verdict. "A pity case." The last words hit like metal on the floor. Her chest tightened. She had grown used to the stares, the whispers, the cruel captions online. Brilliant CEO, but who would ever love a chair? But hearing it here, in the one place where she should have owned the room, shame rose like a tide. The whole deck seemed to hold its breath as if watching her unravel. Isabelle would not let herself collapse. Chin up, 7 degrees. Voice lowered half a notch. She clung to the PR coach's mantra like a life raft. "I came here to talk," she said, steady. "Not to be anyone's punchline." He laughed louder, sharp enough to pierce the glass dome. A few phones lifted, HoloLenses blinking. Isabelle knew. In minutes, a clip would race across the station's network with some headline like "Billion-dollar CEO humiliated on the glass deck." Her chest felt heavy. Part of her wanted to leave. Another part wanted to cut him down with a blade-sharp line. But her hand trembled, betraying the storm inside, whether from rage or hurt, she couldn't tell. And then a different voice. Enough. Not a shout, not harsh. Just a low, solid note like iron striking ground. Heads turned. A man stood at the doorway, completely out of place here. Worn denim jacket, boots with oil stains, a wrist nicked with tiny scratches. He walked calmly through the tables, not fast, not hesitant. He didn't look at the man who had laughed. He only looked at Isabelle. Those eyes stopped her. No pity, no curiosity, just presence steady like gravity. He came to her side, placed one solid hand on the armrest of her chair. Not invasive, not controlling, just support. "Ready to go?" he asked. His voice was deep but warm, as if saying there's still a safe place in this world. Isabelle swallowed hard. How long had it been since anyone spoke to her that simply? Not "Are you okay?" Not "Let me help." Just "Want to leave?" A lifeline out of the abyss. She nodded, small but enough. He, Liam, though she wouldn't know his name until later, gently steered the hover chair. No extra words, no grand gestures. As they passed the man, Liam only said one line, sharp as a scalpel. "She deserves better." That was it. No one stopped them. The crowd parted in silence like water pulling back with the tide. The glass doors opened. Cool air slipped through Isabelle's hair, carrying a faint trace of salt from the pressure system. The corridor outside glowed with soft blue, the color of artificial night. Liam let go of the chair, letting her guide herself again, a small act, but one that felt like giving back something she had almost forgotten, the right to move on her own. They walked in silence, only the sound of her chair's airflow and his footsteps on metal. Isabelle glanced at him under the tilted lights. His face was marked with fatigue, dark circles, scratches, streaks of grease he hadn't washed away. A worker, a stranger among the powerful, yet the only one who had appeared at the right moment. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "You don't even know me." He shrugged, eyes steady on the corridor ahead. "Don't need to." The words unlocked something inside her like a lock snapping open. Isabelle let out a small laugh, not the practiced smile of a CEO, not the mask. Just a sound rising from a place she thought was buried, under months of wheels, of stares, of pity. For the first time since the accident, she realized she could still laugh. Deck E3 of Epsilon felt like another world. If the Agora deck was all spotlight and ceremony, every step like a close-up on film. Then here under the giant glass dome, the light flickered, trembled like the breath of something old but alive. Strings of yellow bulbs swung loosely, trembling in the artificial breeze from the air ducts. Plastic tables wobbled under the weight of miners just off their shifts, clothes still carrying the smell of plasma oil and dust. Laughter burst out freely, no filter, no calculation. Children chased bubble drones that shimmered like falling stars, and above it all the air was thick with food. Smoke from grilling protein skewers, steam from dumplings, fried onion, ginger, and the salty tang of recycled seaweed sauce. Isabelle hesitated as her hover chair slid into the space. She had grown up with ebony tables in private glass rooms, champagne poured in silence, silver cutlery polished to a shine. Here everything spoke a language she had never learned, scratched tables, shaky chairs, loud voices drowning out etiquette. She felt as if she had stepped off the script and into an improvisation. Liam didn't try to explain, didn't try to reassure. He just walked, boots stained with oil clicking against the alloy floor. He stopped at a small stall. The vendor was an elderly Urix woman, magnifying lenses round as moons, her fingers quick as if jointed twice. Skewers sizzled on the grill, plasma fire lighting the wrinkles on her face like rivers across an ancient planet. 2 skewers, 1 fried dumpling, 2 lemon rehydration bottles, Liam said steady as though he'd ordered here 100 times. Isabelle stayed quiet, just watching. No one seemed to notice she was CEO Isabelle Veran, or maybe they did, but no one cared. That alone felt strange, almost unsettling. Since when had not being noticed become a gift? Then the accident happened. A thick drop of sauce slipped from a skewer, landing squarely on her shoe, running down to her ankle. Her heart seized. Her body froze, pulled back into old reflexes. The memories came, people fumbling to clean her shoes, muttering endless sorry, sorry, their pity staring longer than needed. The sugar-sweet phrases that stung like acid. "You're amazing, considering you can still live like this." Isabelle held her breath, hand tightening on the chair. She waited for that moment when she'd be turned into another case study in resilience. But Liam said nothing. He just pulled out a rag from his pocket, the kind every mechanic carried. A simple, practiced move. He crouched, wiped away the sauce, slow, unhurried, not awkward, as if cleaning a piece of machinery with care. When he finished, he lifted her foot gently back onto the rest of the chair. Solid, natural, so natural it left her stunned. No pity, no performance, no hollow words, just a man doing what needed to be done. She shivered, not from the heat, but from the difference. For the first time since the accident, someone touched her not as something fragile, not as a burden, just as a person. A tear rose at the corner of her eye, but she blinked hard, forcing it back. "Thank you," she whispered, voice rough, like a word unused for too long. Liam stood, slid the rag into his pocket, shrugged like he'd just tightened a bolt. "It's just sauce." She shook her head, eyes bright. No, not just sauce. The noise around them faded. Children's laughter, the hiss of frying oil, the chatter, all blurred to the edges. Isabelle realized her heartbeat was racing, not from shame, but from something new. The feeling of being seen, not for her title, not for her chair, but for herself. They began to eat. Isabelle tried a dumpling, The ginger, garlic, and synthetic meat melted on her tongue, hot, strange, but delicious. So delicious it startled a small laugh out of her, light and unexpected. Liam told stories. His voice was low, steady, not trying to impress. He spoke of a rescue drone in his workshop that thought it was a fish and kept leaping into the water tank. Isabelle laughed out loud, a clear laugh, louder than she meant. Her chest felt lighter, as if invisible ropes had loosened. Above them, the dome opened onto a sea of stars. Billions burned, died, and flared back to life, doing their ancient work. Isabelle sat there, among plastic chairs and clouds of food smoke, and realized something simple. Healing didn't need a lab or the tissue therapies she once invented. It began with an old rag, a quiet gesture, and someone who knew when silence said enough. And Isabelle, the woman who thought she had forgotten how, laughed again in the crackle of oil and fire. After that night at the food stalls under the dome, Epsilon Station no longer felt endless. For Isabelle, it seemed to shrink into familiar corridors, small meeting points, places where she might accidentally run into Liam. Accidental, yet not entirely. Each encounter felt like two distant bodies in space slowly bending into the same orbit. One afternoon, after a tense holo conference with the council, Isabelle happened to pass through Deck G. Liam was there, sitting on a cargo crate, eating from a scratched plastic lunchbox, wiping sweat with that same old rag. When he saw her, he only smiled, as if he'd expected it. "Workers' lunch," he said, half joking. "Want to try?" She hesitated. The woman once served with silver knives under crystal chandeliers, now holding a plastic box of food. But when the lid opened, the spicy scent of alien seasoning made her laugh out loud. Her first bite brought back memories of her student days. Cheap meals rushed in the library before the titles of CEO or biotech prodigy turned every dinner into ceremony. She smiled, an unguarded smile free of masks. Liam noticed, said nothing more than a nod. The best food doesn't need presentation. Isabelle replied softly, almost a confession. Like people just need to be real. The words hung between them, warm as a note struck inside a quiet room. On another evening, the dome square pulsed with light. A street band had set up speakers, playing electronic string instruments. The sound reverberated across the glass, doubled and echoed, waves of rhythm through the station floor. Isabelle stood beside Liam, eyes closed. The music washed away the noise of meetings, reports, endless plans. Each note cracked open a small window in her chest, where silence and discipline had lived too long. When she opened her eyes, she saw Liam wasn't watching the band or the crowd. He was watching her, not to analyze, not to judge, but as if he wanted to capture her smile to keep it for himself. She, startled, turned away, but her heart beat faster, louder than the music. The sound bound them together, no explanations, no schedules. Two orbits that once were strangers now touched, like two drums falling into the same rhythm in the cold of space. That night, back in her private apartment, Isabelle couldn't sleep. Her hand drifted to an old drawer. Inside, under a thin layer of dust, was a box of glowing pens, the tools she once loved as a young artist. Since the accident, they'd lain silent, relics of a broken dream. She had believed no one would ever look at her drawings again, that every gaze would stop at the hover chair, never past it. But that night, Isabelle picked up a pen. Plasma light traced across the smart paper, shaky at first. She didn't draw a nebula or herself. She drew Liam. Bent under a maintenance lamp, strong hands holding a stubborn rescue drone, sweat glinting like silver. Eyes focused, not searching for glory, only the quiet belief that even small work could save someone. Her hand trembled, not from fear this time, but from feeling. Creativity, long buried, surged awake. A few days later, she handed the drawing to Liam. No words, just placed it in his hand. He stared at the page, at first surprise. Then slowly his face softened, uncertain how to hold this gift. The silence stretched so long Isabelle's heart dipped, fearing he might laugh or turn it aside. But at last he whispered, voice rough as steel scraping. "No one's ever drawn me before. It wasn't complaint, just a fact so simple it hurt. His whole life had been the roar of engines, the smell of grease, the shadows of the workshop, never the center of anyone's gaze, until now. Isabelle had turned him into an image worth remembering. She answered, quiet but firm. Well, now you have one. The moment had no fireworks, no grand symphony, just a single note echoing in the vastness, but enough to set a new rhythm. Isabelle with scars hidden under the armor of a CEO. Liam with hands rough but unexpectedly gentle. In the long corridors of Epsilon Station, under the stars beyond the dome, they began to share a simple secret, that both of them deserved to be seen, not by the world, but by each other. At night, Epsilon Station became something else. When the glowing holo ads shut down, when the glare of the Agora deck faded, the station lived only by the pulse of emergency lights and the steady hum of air filters. Now and then, a freight ship roared past the orbit, leaving a streak of ion fire like glowing ink against the black sky. Liam had asked Isabelle to meet him somewhere she had never gone, the Wave Ring Square. It was a hidden corner beneath the dome, where free artists, human and alien, gathered to perform without council permits. Her first instinct was to refuse. Every instinct drilled into her as a CEO told her it wasn't her kind of place, filled with migrants, street singers, even undocumented aliens. But when Liam lifted his head, his eyes weren't pleading or persuading, just steady, as if he wanted her to see something for herself. So Isabelle nodded. They arrived just as the crowd thinned. The square opened under the glass dome, the night sky wide enough to swallow them whole. Folding chairs formed a rough half-circle around a tiny stage, only a few plates of metal bolted together, lit by strings of plasma lights swaying in the artificial wind. No red curtains, no VIP rows, only the smell of ozone mixed with damp smoke from the vents. And somehow in its roughness the place felt alive. Workers still in dust stain. Liam steered Isabelle's hover chair closer. He leaned down, voice low. Too close? She shook her head, smiling softly. No, just right. The musician stepped forward, a Sailari alien thin as glass branches, translucent skin reflecting light, eyes a deep violet blue like wells of stars. He carried no instrument. He simply sat cross-legged, hands pressed to his temples. And then the waves began, not singing, not strings or flutes, but neural waves, broadcast through a resonance field vibrating into air. The crowd didn't just hear with their ears, they felt it on their skin, in their chests, in the joints of their bones. The first wave rolled through, smooth as silk. Isabelle shivered, her hover chair trembled as if breathing with the sound. Liam tilted his head, a flicker of amusement in his eyes at her awe. Just feel it, he whispered. Don't think. And then it happened. A slower rhythm slipped in, a pattern that matched perfectly with the lullaby Isabelle's mother once sang to her as a child. She had buried that song for years. After the accident, after her family broke apart, after all that remained was emptiness, she had not dared to remember it. But now it returned, wrapping around her like familiar arms. The hover chair became her childhood bed. The small room came back, pink sunset spilling through a window, her mother's hand brushing golden hair, her voice soft, murmuring, "Whatever you do, do it with your whole heart." Isabelle clutched the chair, her breath breaking. Tears streamed hot and unstoppable. For the first time in years, she didn't hide, didn't mask. Pain burst free as sobs. People glanced over, but no one judged, because the music had touched them all. When the performance ended, silence fell, as if no one dared to break it. Isabelle bowed her head, shoulders shaking. Liam leaned closer, one hand resting lightly on the armrest. No pressure, no intrusion, just presence. His voice, rough, steady, meant only for her. Your mother already saw the part of you that mattered most. She looked up. Through blurred tears, his face shimmered under the plasma glow. No pity, no cheap comfort, just truth, bare, gentle. The words slid into place like a missing piece. All those years Isabelle had fought to prove her worth to the council, to her father, to the world, had really been her search for the gaze of someone long gone. And now, through a stranger's song, Liam had given it back, the reminder that love doesn't vanish. It only changes frequency, waiting for someone willing to listen. As they left the square, the dome glittered with millions of distant stars. Isabelle still trembled, but not with shame as she had on that blind date long ago. This trembling was different, the shock of touching a memory she thought lost forever. Along the long corridor, Liam walked slowly, his steps syncing with the hum of her hover chair. Neither spoke. Yet in the silence, Isabelle felt it clearly. She was no longer drifting alone. Her fingers brushed the sketch in her pocket, the drawing of Liam bent under plasma light, repairing a stubborn drone. And she knew deep inside, from this night on, her pen would not stay silent again. Nights on Epsilon were usually alive with noise. Announcements echoed through metal corridors. Cargo ships docked, leaving holo-trails across the outer glass. In the commercial tiers, ads poured down like rain, blinding, colorful, relentless. But on ring level 9, the mechanics district, silence settled cold as steel. Liam Kael locked his workshop. His breath still carried ozone after hours of engine repair. His shirt was soaked with oil, sweat trailing down his neck. He tossed the rag into a bucket, pulled on a frayed denim jacket. In his mind, only one thought: get home to the East Sector apartment, where Isabelle was waiting for a dinner messag. Boo! The alley to the main corridor was blocked. 3 figures stood in the dark. No words, just the steady rhythm of boots striking metal. Liam froze, tool bag tight in his hand. He had seen their kind before in the military, straight-backed, eyes cold as dead stars. The first man lunged. A plasma fist slammed into his ribs. Pain burst, his back crashing against an empty crate. Another strike cracked his jaw, blood flooding his mouth. Liam blocked a kick, but the other 2 pinned his shoulders. Metal clanged, breath tore ragged through the narrow hall. When he collapsed, one crouched close, voice sharp as a blade. "You don't belong in her orbit. Walk away, mechanic." They left him there. Only the sting of burnt ozone remained and blood pooling on the floor. News traveled fast. Isabelle heard from station security a technician assaulted near level 9. Her hover chair cut through the red-lit corridors like an arrow. The sight stopped her cold. Liam slumped against a wall, jacket ripped, blood streaking down his temple. "Liam!" Her voice broke, almost a scream. He looked up, forcing a faint smile, trying to stay calm. Just a rough night. But Isabelle wasn't blind. The strikes were too precise. This wasn't robbery. It was a message. And when she traced the security feeds, every signal pointed back to one man, Liam Veran, her father. The chairman's office crowned the highest tower of Epsilon. Isabelle entered, the glass dome reflecting her father's face, hard, motionless, carved from stone. Liam Veran stood by the holodesk, blue light cutting across the lines of his face until he looked more like metal than flesh. "You've crossed a line," he said, flat and final. "What line, father?" Isabelle's voice trembled but sharp. "You're a CEO, heir to Veran Biotech. The stars watch you, and you tangle yourself with a nameless mechanic. A deserter, a man outside the council's ordered. You mean to drag this family into the dirt." Her hands clenched the armrest of her chair, her eyes blazing. "He was there when no one else stayed. He sees me, not the title you built." William's palm struck the holodesk, light fractured into shards. "He is unworthy. I gave him a chance to step away in silence. If he refuses, you ordered the attack." Isabelle snapped, voice hissing through her teeth. He said nothing, but silence was enough. That night Liam sat in his small apartment, wounds wrapped in crude bandages. The dim lamp lit his bruised face. In front of him, the holocom blinked, dozens of messages from Isabelle. "Where are you? Please answer. I'm scared." He wanted to reply, to tell her the truth, that Liam Veran had threatened him, that if he stayed, the cost would not just be bruises, it could be Isabelle's life. But he knew if she fought her father, she would lose everything, so he typed only one line: "I met someone else." When he pressed send, pain split his chest as if he had torn himself in 2. The message lit Isabelle's screen just as she left her father's office. Only 8 words, yet to her it was a death sentence. Her hand dropped limp. Her whole body shook. The hover chair stood still, but inside, her world collapsed. Images surged back, Liam's smile under the dome, his hands wiping sauce from her shoe, his whisper, "Your mother already saw the part of you that mattered most." All of it shattered in one line of text. She turned from the glass doors, eyes burning red. She knew this wasn't just loss. It was betrayal of fate itself. Days passed. Isabelle worked like a machine. Meetings, contracts, holo speeches, perfect, flawless. The stars saw in her a CEO untouchable, unbreakable. But at night in her empty apartment, she sat in darkness, fingers gripping the unused Sin X module. She tried to replay her mother's lullaby. But now the melody broke apart, off-key, fading into nothing. Inside Isabelle's heart, only one thing remained. A fracture so deep no science could heal. A shadow no light could reach. Ga, a frontier planet, was famous for its light acid rain. It fell like glowing curtains, leaving thin smoke trails on metal rooftops. Under flickering holo ads, the streets turned into rivers of neon, each puddle reflecting broken shards of memory. Migrants hurried for cover. Drones buzzed, sweeping the rain from the pavement. The air was heavy with ozone, rust, and the bitter tang of acid moisture. Isabelle Veran moved silently down the empty boulevard. Her hover chair skimmed over the scarred surface, jacket soaked through. Ion raindrops struck like needles on metal. She didn't know why she had come here to deck G, her hands. In the neon dark, she looked like a fragment dropped into the wrong world. A cold CEO, heir to an empire, now just a lonely figure rolling through melting streets. The streetlights flickered once, then died. And from the far end, a shriek tore the night. A hover car, engines screaming. Plasma wheels spitting sparks, spun out of control. Isabelle turned too late. Her chair jolted, wheels caught in an ion drain. Stuck. Panic surged, memories crashing back, the debris, the explosion, her body thrown into weightless dark. Her chest seized, breath ragged, throat locked. The car roared closer, light slicing the rain like a blade. And then, a shadow leapt from the alley, strong arms wrapped around her. The chair ripped free of the drain, thrown aside just in time. The vehicle tore past, plasma burning the ground, ozone stinging the air. Isabelle gasped, trembling. She lifted her eyes and met a gaze she knew. Drenched in rain, wild, fierce, Liam Kael. The acid rain fell harder, stripping silver from rooftops, but they didn't move. Water streamed down Isabelle's face, mixing with hot tears she could no longer hide. "You left me." Her voice cracked like metal breaking under strain. Liam shook not from rain, but from the words he'd buried for months. He bent close, voice raw. "I had to. Your father sent men. He told me to walk away or he'd destroy everything around you. Isabelle, disappearing was the only way I knew to keep you safe." She laughed through tears, harsh, broken. "Protection was never what I needed. What I needed was you." The words shattered his armor. In the neon flicker, he saw her, not the CEO, not the heir, but a woman trembling, unmasked, daring to face the truth. No more words. Isabelle gripped the collar of his worn denim jacket. He leaned down. Their lips met under the acid rain. It wasn't a kiss of salvation, not a promise of forever, just truth, that despite power, threats, and shadows, what they felt was real. The rain stung their lips, but salt tears and shared warmth drowned the pain. The city blurred, melting away. Only heartbeat and breath remained, two souls finding each other again. When they pulled apart, their foreheads rested together. Breath mingled, hot and trembling. "I thought I was strong enough to walk away," Liam whispered. "But every step without you was hollow." Isabelle touched the bruise on his cheek, her fingers shaking but steady. "Then don't walk away again, not for him, not for anyone." Neon light reflected in their eyes, no council, no empire, no shadow of fate, only two people. A mechanic with scarred hands, a CEO in a hover chair, choosing each other in the storm. And somewhere in the city, beneath the acid rain, hope took root again. The Veran Spire, the tallest tower on Epsilon, was not just a building. It was a symbol. From hundreds of kilometers away, its light pierced the ion clouds like a blade stabbing into the stars. Inside, the central hall stretched like a cathedral. Golden holo panels lined the vaulted ceiling. Light spilled onto black marble floors polished like mirrors, where every step left a long shadow, small against the vastness. Along both sides, statues of Veran ancestors loomed in metal, their eyes cold as eternal judges. Isabelle Veran rolled her hover chair down the hall. Her hand clenched the control, veins rising, heart pounding as if to break free. But her gaze was steady. Calm had been forged into her through years of conferences where a single mistake meant blood in the water. Beside her walked Liam Kael. Oil-stained boots left streaks across the flawless floor. In this palace of power, he was a crack in the stone, and that crack was the only thing that let Isabelle breathe. At the far end, William Veran waited. No guards, no aides. His authority alone made whole star systems tremble. He stood tall, silver hair neatly combed, long cloak threaded with silver glinting like a statue of power itself. His eyes, cold, sharp as plasma, locked on them. His voice thundered, echoing through the hollow hall. "You are a Veran. Your blood, your life, belongs to an empire. This family does not bow to mechanics." The sound pressed against the air, crushing it into silence. Isabelle's chest tightened, but she drew in breath and held it. Her voice rose, not loud, but clear, a blade drawn. "I didn't choose this empire. It was forced on me, but I do choose who I love." William gave a dry laugh, sharp as colliding steel. Love doesn't secure treaties. Love doesn't stabilize markets. Love doesn't command fleets. You sit there because of my name, my empire, my will. Strip that away, Isabelle. What are you? She leaned forward, green light from the hover chair casting across her face. "I am me, and for once, Father, that is enough." William's gaze turned to Liam, heavy, crushing, like the gravity of a dead world. "You think you can carry her weight? Do you know the orbit you've stepped into? Men like you fix engines, scrape by on grease and sweat. But when storms of war and politics strike, you'll break, and you'll drag her down with you." Liam stood tall, calloused hands tightening until veins rose. His voice was rough, steady. "I don't need your orbit, sir. I don't need your empire, your council, or your permission. I only need to be where Isabelle is. And when storms come, I'll do what I've always done. I'll stand, even if the galaxy burns." For a moment, William faltered, not because he believed, but because he saw no lie in Liam's voice, only raw truth. The hall fell silent. Even the holo lights flickered, as if the tower itself held its breath. William stepped forward, his voice low, cold as frozen steel. "Then hear me. Walk out with him, Isabelle, and do not return. You will no longer bear my name. You will no longer inherit my empire. You will be nothing." A tremor ran through Isabelle's hands. Memories surged, her father's hand on her shoulder at her first ceremony, the cold lessons drilled into her, his command never to cry before an audience. Now, with one sentence, he sought to erase it all. Then she felt Liam's hand on hers, not commanding, not pushing, just steady. Warmth replaced the trembling. Isabelle lifted her head, her eyes cut sharp, her voice clear, each word a blade. "Then nothing I shall be, but at least that nothing will be mine." Her hover chair turned. The wheels glided across the marble, crisp and sure. Liam walked beside her, his fingers entwined with hers, a silent vow. Together they moved toward the great doors. The Veran crest carved in metal swung open, light from outside flooding in like a supernova. William did not call them back. He stood frozen, eyes like stone casting long shadows over their backs. And in one last glance, Isabelle thought she saw it. Beneath the rage in his stare, a tiny crack. Not the fury of a ruler, but the grief of a father losing what power could never hold. The doors closed behind them. The hall of power sank back into silence. Outside, freedom rushed in. The ozone bite of the streets, the roar of plasma engines, the noise of life unpolished but alive. Isabelle drew a deep breath. For the first time, she no longer wore the Veran name as chains. She turned to Liam. He said nothing, just held her hand tighter. Together they stepped down into the neon city, blazing beneath the ion rain. Isabelle whispered, just for him and for herself, "I walked away from a prison, and this," her eyes fell to their joined hands, "this is freedom." 3 months had passed since Isabelle Veran turned her back on the marble halls of her family's empire. The outside world she had feared would be harsh and merciless. But instead, it gave her a sky she had never truly breathed before. No more endless meetings, no more schedules woven tight like chains. Now, each morning she woke to the sound of hammers from Liam's shipyard. to the smell of ozone laced with the bitter sweetness of recycled coffee from the corner stall, and to the gaze of a man who promised nothing except to stay. When they decided to hold their engagement, Isabelle sat in her hover chair in the small courtyard behind the workshop. She watched Liam and his friends string pale yellow plasma lights across wooden beams. No million-credit holo architecture. No nano-programmed menus. No contract singers flown in from across the stars. Only borrowed plastic chairs, old tables hastily painted, and wild daisies picked from the edge of the market. And yet when she looked up at the strings of light glowing in the dark, Isabelle felt her heart tremble more deeply than at any grand gala in the Veran estate. The guests arrived. Liam's fellow mechanics, a few neighbors from the floating blocks. Even engineers Isabelle had once helped on biotech projects. They brought small gifts, a jar of fermented nectar, an old microchip etched with "May this connect you," a hand-woven scarf. No one wore crystal gowns or jeweled suits, but the laughter, the warmth filled every empty. Isabelle wore a simple white dress, soft fabric falling loose, unadorned. Her hover chair was wrapped with a few blue ribbons. Liam wore a wrinkled white shirt, sleeves a little too long. But when he stepped out, wiping faint oil from his hands, Isabelle thought him more beautiful than any man who had stood beside her at the Veran galas. Children ran laughing, plasma lights dancing in their eyes. A tiny street band played, only 2 musicians, strings, and a plasma drum. The ceremony began without ritual, without speeches. Liam took Isabelle's hand. They looked at each other, and in the warm glow there was no CEO, no mechanic. Only 2 people making a promise. "I will not leave, I will not let go." And then silence fell. From the gate a figure stepped inside. Tall, older, Liam Veran. No silver cloak, no entourage, only a gray sweater, plain trousers. The crowd froze. Isabelle's body stiffened, her heart hammering, memories of the spire crashing back. Liam's grip on her hand tightened, hot and steady, pulling her into the present. William stopped before them. In the faint yellow glow, he no longer looked like the ruler of worlds. His shoulders bent with age, his eyes marked by loss. He studied his daughter for a long time. Then his gaze turned to the man beside her. No threats, no fury, only a hand, slow and deliberate, reaching out. "Take care of her," he said. His voice was rough, heavy as stone sinking in water. "That's all I ask." The air shattered, not with noise, but with silence. Guests held their breath. Isabelle's lips trembled. Liam hesitated only a heartbeat, then placed his calloused hand in the one that had signed treaties across the stars. It was not an agreement between powers. It was the surrender of a father to a love he could never control. Isabelle broke down, tears spilling hot onto her cheeks. In that instant, she understood her father had not lost power. He had simply admitted that power could never rule a heart. William did not stay. After the handshake, he turned, slipping quietly into the shadows of the floating blocks. No one stopped him. But the weight of that moment branded itself deeper into Isabelle's soul than any speech he had ever given. The celebration resumed, music, laughter, simple joy. Isabelle lifted a glass of rehydrated water, looking up at the sky above. Stars burned beyond the transparent dome. She remembered her mother's words, "One day you'll find your own orbit." Now she knew. That orbit was not in the council, not in treaties. It was here in this garden beside the man who wiped oil from his hands so he could hold hers. As night fell, they sat side by side, fingers entwined, silent. Isabelle whispered, "Maybe we'll never rule an empire, but maybe we can build something better, a refuge among the stars." Liam turned, plasma light reflected in his eyes. He nodded slowly. "A refuge is all I ever wanted, somewhere you don't have to fight just to exist." And beneath the burning sky, Isabelle Veran knew. Though she had lost the name Veran, she had found something greater than any legacy, a home among the stars. Nerai 4 lay at the edge of the Alliance, a world with no silver towers, no crowded flight paths, only oceans stretching wide and beaches of violet sand glittering like stardust under the glow of twin moons. It was a place Liam had visited long ago during his fleet service, one of the rare peaceful worlds he had kept in memory. A promise to himself that one day he would return, not to fight, but to live. When their small ship landed, the hatch opened. Wind swept in, carrying the sharp tang of minerals and saltwater mist. Strange, familiar. Isabelle inhaled deeply, her chest expanding as if for the first true breath of her life. She sat in her hover chair, eyes wide. Before her stretched the silver-violet shore, waves from an alien sea rolling gently, reflecting the green-blue light of the twin moons. Liam came beside her, silent at first. Then he reached out his hand, not commanding, not pitying, just an invitation. Isabelle glanced down at her legs, those legs that had long forgotten freedom. Fear rose like a tide, but Liam's eyes steadied it. No pressure, no judgment, only presence. "I'll be here if you want to try." She nodded, breath broken. Liam bent, carefully releasing the safety locks of the hover chair. Then his arms slipped around her waist, lifting her light frame, used to metal's support rather than sand's softness. Heart pounded wildly as her feet touched ground. Cold, soft. Grains of violet sand slipped between her toes, clinging like tiny stars. Her muscles trembled in protest. Her knees seemed too weak to hold her own weight, but Liam was there, his arm a living brace. "You don't have to do it alone," he whispered. Isabelle swallowed tears, gripped his shoulder, and moved her foot forward, one step. The faint crunch of sand beneath her foot thundered in her chest. Then another, shaking, unsteady, but hers. Isabelle laughed through tears, voice breaking. "You caught me when I was falling." Liam pressed his forehead to hers, his voice rough but steady. "And I'll be here for every step after." Under the twin moons they moved together, each small step a victory. Isabelle was no longer the cold CEO before a council, no longer the woman in a hover chair beneath stares of pity. She was Isabelle, a human being, relearning to trust her legs, to trust another's strength, and to trust herself. As her feet pressed deeper into the sand, memories surged back. The days after the accident, lying motionless in a med bay, doctors delivering permanent loss like a verdict. Her father signing rehabilitation documents with the detachment of a failed business contract. She had believed her life was over, that she was nothing but a shadow in a flying chair. But here, under narrow force sky, Isabelle knew she had been wrong. Not because her legs were whole again, but because each trembling step, slow and imperfect, was hers. Not Veran's, not her father's. Hers. They sank into the sand, sitting close, Isabelle leaning against Liam. Together they watched the twin moons shimmer across the sea, waves glowing silver as they broke. She lifted a handful of violet sand, letting it slip between her fingers. It scattered in the wind, sparkling like fragments of fading memory. "I used to think I was a burden," she whispered. Liam caught her hand, squeezed gently. "You're a universe you don't even see, and me, all I want is to walk it with you." She raised her head, eyes catching the honesty in his. No crowns, no thrones, only a promise without words. "Wherever we go, I won't leave." They sat until dawn painted the sky turquoise. Isabelle was weary, but her heart overflowed. For the first time in years, she did not feel caged by her chair, nor defined by her wound. She was not the Veran CEO, not the girl in the hover chair. She was simply Isabelle. A woman taking her first steps on violet sand with the man she loved beside her. And in that moment she knew this was more than a step. It was the beginning of a new journey. Orion's loop station drifted slowly around a violet-green nebula, its light spilling across the glass dome like a living ribbon of silk. Inside, there were no gilded halls, no grand orchestras of the High Council. Only a small dining room bolted to the station's central axis. Tables and chairs carved from old ship hulls. Plasma bulbs hanging on cables wrapped around air ducts. Isabelle sat at the center table, her hover chair adjusted low so her hands could rest on the wood like everyone else's. In front of her, not a vacuum-aged vintage poured in Krista. Beside it, around her sat familiar faces, mechanics, nurses, engineers, even a few aliens she had met in the station corridors. No formal, only were. Boo. Liam stood beside her, hand resting lightly on her shoulder, a quiet reminder that he was there. His hair tousled, his shirt wrinkled, but his eyes shone brighter than any star outside the dome. As the table filled with chatter, Isabelle lifted her gaze beyond the glass. The nebula bloomed outward like a cosmic flower, its purple and green threads painting the dark. Billions of stars pulsed like beating hearts, an endless universe, yet suddenly close, intimate. She raised her glass, her voice shook but carried strength. No thrones, no commands, no inherited legacies, only a bridge, and that bridge is built from the simplest thing, love. Silence fell for a heartbeat, then glasses lifted, touching metal with crystal, ringing like a small bell echoing far. Some aliens rustled their wings, releasing a long harmonic note, their way of agreeing. Sin X, the technology her father had once wielded as a weapon of control, was now something different, not forced synchronization, not obedience, but a bridge of choice. Modules glowed faintly at people's throats, not uniform, not imposed. A mechanic's pulse linked with an alien miner's. A nurse's emotions synced with a hybrid child's laughter. No barriers, no isolation, only connection. Liam bent, whispering at Isabelle's ear. I used to think love was just between two people, but now, she smiled, finishing softly, it can become a bridge for an entire universe. For a while, they said nothing more. The room hummed with laughter, with voices weaving together. The station itself vibrated with quiet rhythm, and Isabelle felt it, peace flowing through her body like light. For the first time in years, she was not fighting to prove her worth. She did not need to be Veran's CEO. She did not need to hold the image her father had carved. She only needed to be here at this table with Liam, with these friends, with the family she chose. Outside the glass, the stars still burned, each one a heartbeat, the universe a chorus without end. Isabelle placed her hand over Liam's. Together they whispered like a prayer. This is not the end. This is only the beginning. Across the vastness, we will keep building bridges, one heartbeat to another. And so in that small dining room, there were no thrones, no commands, no legacies of power. Only love shared. A beginning. The bridge beyond stars. A bridge where humans and aliens, past and future, pain and hope, all could meet and belong.